I think that in terms of culture, the 5 most powerful words are, that's not who we are.
Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome back to So Here's My Story. I'm Jody.
I'm Eliot, and I'm going to bring you today a story of how I walked 60 miles
Dun, dun, dun.
to figure out how to build a company culture.
Cool. Like a really good company culture.
A really good culture.
Cool. So we will get to that in just a few minutes. I know that's something a lot of people have lots of questions about. So I think we could come back to that one over and over again. But a couple quick things before we jump into that. One, we have our newest Facebook group member, which is Ryan. And, I really want to, I'm going to have to say something about all these people with hard to pronounce names. I think it's only because I feel bad if I do it wrong. Is it Kujawa? I'm not sure. It's Kujawa, but Ryan with 2 N's. I did not spell it wrong on my page. Welcome.
See, when you were saying hard to pronounce names, I thought you were stumbling over whether it was Ryan.
Right. No, now don't. Yeah, no. So she has 2 N's, and I believe she's joining us from the University of Michigan, at least I think.
University of Minnesota.
I'm sorry, Minnesota.
It's an M state.
It is an M state. I'm terrible at geography. Sorry about that, Ryan. So now I've botched your name. I've botched your geography.
But, Ryan did not chime in on the question that we had asked about the rudest animal. So my question to her, if she's listening, is your first name is Ryann, and I'm wondering which N is silent.
Oh, God, you're so annoying.
Well, hey.
It's like a bad dad joke. So she joins the group and you just jump into the bad dad joke.
Well, she could have responded to the rudest animal, but she did not.
All right. Anyway, more importantly, we have just concluded our birthday month.
Yes, we did.
And we did our drawing late last week. And so you can check out that video if you want. It's on our social media in a couple places of us doing the drawing, but I can announce to you now since it's after the fact.
Please
the winner was the one and only Julie Gabrielli.
Yay!
And Julie is super excited. In fact, I believe she's actually had a story planned for quite a while. So
that's very cool.
Yeah, so we'll have to organize that, get everybody together, and we will have our first third person to banter along. So
very nice.
All right, here we go.
Okay. Oh, first, let me thank our sponsors.
Sure. Tom
Loveland and Mind Over Machines, Cat's Copy, the architecture firm of GWWO, and Marycraft Staffing and HR Solutions. So here's my story. As you know, a couple weeks ago, at the end of September, I participated in this 60-mile walk. It's for Susan G. Komen. It's a 3-day, 20-mile-per-day walk.
You shouldn't tell people it's 3 days. You should just make it sound like you walked 60 miles
Right.
straight.
I said 21 hours out of 24. I was just walking. By the end of it, they didn't know where the heck I was. But
sorry, go ahead.
So Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, 20 miles a day. And it's, of course, for Susan G. Komen. So there's a fundraising part of it and there's a training part of it. But what fascinated me about this, and this is why I wanted to tell the story, is how the charity, how Susan G. Komen as an organization ties people so closely and in so many different ways to their mission. Because the goal of Susan G. Komen at this event, now remember, by the time you get to this event, you can't even get your room reservations or officially get your credentials to be on the walk until you've made your minimum fundraising goal, I think, of $2,300.
Gotcha.
So to be crass about it, they have the money in the bank.
Right.
So what their mission is on this walk.
Right. So in theory, they could be done with you at that point.
They could be done with you.
We've got your cash.
Yes.
Move on.
So what they really want to do is they want to bring you even closer into their network because they want you to do it again and again and again and contribute in other ways.
And invite friends.
And be advocates. And so they really want to make you part of their organization, part of their mission. And so the way they do it is so fascinating to me, because I'll just reel off a couple of them, because otherwise I'll spend the whole episode just detailing this. And, so the first thing
I can just head home if you want to.
You can go home. You know? So the first thing that they do is, when you register, they have different color lanyards if you're a first timer like I was. This was the first time I did the 3-day, or a veteran. And so the goal is, and they tell you, if you're a veteran, you look for the black lanyards. Those are the first timers, and welcome them and talk to them and whatever. So they have part of their group making sure to bring somebody else, to bring the rookies in. And I read about this, just a quick tangent. I read about a recommendation for a restaurant that said, once you call up for a reservation and the person asks you, have you ever been here before? And they say no. The recommendation was that for anybody who says, no, this is my first time at the restaurant, to give them red napkins. So everybody on staff knows this is somebody new. I mean, we want to wow everybody, but we want to wow these people. Or you can make them wear like a bib
or something.
Yes, humiliate them, which is really the goal. So anyway, so you had the black lanyards to differentiate. And people during the walk would say, oh, this is your first time. Or they had support personnel, serving as everything from crossing guards. This was in Philadelphia, and the coordination with the city was incredible. But so they had a big support organization, people serving as crossing guards. They had cheering stations, but they would always point out, this is your first time, you're doing great. And so they'd be cheerleaders for that. Along the route, they would have signs that some of the signs would highlight individual people. This is Joan Smith, and she is the number 12 fundraiser for this walk. She raised $12,900 and whatever. So as you're walking along, you kind of see these things over and over again, and you get to see
a leaderboard.
Yes, you get to see the leaderboard, and they're real people. It's not just numbers. It's not just someone raised $12,000, but you see this picture of this person, and you see a little bit of her story. Then they give you things, you've seen them, people put them on the back of their shirts, or with Komen, when you're walking, you have a backpack with like a spare pair of shoes and spare socks. So you have these signs on the back. I'm walking for ... So people will tell their stories. I'm walking for my wife, Karen, who is a 12-year survivor. I'm walking for my sister who passed away in 2014.
So they make it personal.
So they make it personal. And it's not just Komen making it personal. Each person, particularly the veterans, but they encourage the rookies to do this too, are telling you their story visually before. You don't have to go up to them and say, hi, why are you walking today?
Yeah.
Because you're literally spending 7 hours. Only
looking
one
the back
person
of someone's
isn't
story.
walking behind somebody, right? Everybody else is spending 7 hours reading other people's stories.
Yeah, it's funny. And I don't want to distract you, but that one reminds me a little bit of recognizing where you have a captive audience.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit like those whoever finally had the aha moment to put those ads in like toilet stalls,
yes.
Or above the urinals. You're like,
right,
people are standing here. They have nothing else
correct.
to do. Well, until smartphones, now they have something else to do, but still,
correct.
Like where you have a captive audience and where you can actually, make use of someone's focused attention. And yeah, you're looking at someone's back. So,
and see, another thing, when you said until they had smartphones, one of the things that Komen said in the rules, and they were very gentle about this, but consistent, they didn't want you looking at your phone, and they didn't want you wearing headphones either. And they said, it's a safety issue, distract you from what's going on in the city, whatever. It wasn't a safety issue. I don't believe not much. Issue. It's a community issue. They want to build the community. So they had that way of doing things.
There went your entire plan to be listening to podcasts. So you didn't have to chat all day.
That's right. That's exactly what I wanted to do. They had at the rest stations, they would have their youth corps come around and pick up trash and ask you, do you want some water or whatever? But as they were doing that, they would tell you, and they would have little things on there. They would tell you a little bit about their story, if they're outgoing and why they're here. Oh, my mom's here, and she's done this 3 times. She's a 3-time walker. And then you had, of course, the various speeches at breakfast, and they'd have survivors come up.
Sure.
They'd have their banners talking about their core I don't know whether you call them core values, but certainly the core concepts of courage and fight and community and engagement and advocacy. And you'd see these banners as people would walk. And I was just struck by the different ways. It's just like you say, a good teacher will engage students regardless of different learning styles. And this event was really built for any type of learning style. There was, everywhere you looked, you were inside what they called the pink bubble. That's what they said. It was their reality, and you could not make a move without understanding their mission, their impact, what they wanted you to do, people's personal connection, why people cared so deeply, and getting to know other people who were advocates for them. I just thought the whole thing not only was very well done, but was fascinating. And here's the last thing I'll say about this before I turn it over to you, and that is that it sounds easy for Komen because you're fighting against breast cancer. It's a life or death issue. People lose people who are very important to them. They are with them in the fight. They're survivors. It's a very emotional thing. But I guess, if you're an accounting firm or just landscaping, HR, computers, whatever it happens to be, you're not necessarily dealing with that life or death. I'm trying to cure cancer, literally, as my mission. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are for businesses that don't happen to, or organizations that don't happen to be Susan G. Komen, or the House of Ruth, or something like that. How they can tie people to their mission, and whether any of these lessons are useful in those non-emotionally wrenching businesses.
Nope. They're not. So just hit their head.
Well, thanks for being with us. I'd like to thank our sponsors.
No. Absolutely. I mean, and in different ways. I mean, a couple of the things I was thinking about while you were talking was, I think there's always value. Although this is kind of funny. You talk about different learning styles. When you first mentioned the black lanyards, but I was trying not to interrupt you too often to crack a joke, but what I almost asked you was, were you jealous of or envious or whatever? Did you aspire to, did it make you want to be one of the not first timers? Because there's a double-edged sword about being a first timer, you're a newbie, whatever. I don't always love that attention. Everybody like, oh, it's your first time. It's your first time. I'm like, sometimes. However, I will say, I went to a conference this past August, and very much my first time in an industry. It was the podcast thing, in an industry that I'm not super familiar. I knew no one, and I wish that there was a little bit more of that, because I didn't know anyone, so it was hard to and lots of people did know people. So I think there's something important to be said for getting people in the river, if getting them into the soup of your community, of like, how do you facilitate them like being woven in? Well, see, they did that two ways. To answer your question, I didn't, and I know you were kind of saying it tongue in cheek a little bit, but I didn't aspire to the pink lanyard. It wasn't a different color lanyard, but what they gave out were buttons that people had on the back, just like their story. And so you would see somebody, this is and they had a blank, 4th 3-day. Mm-hmm. And so there was this sense as you were around the tables where, wow, you've done this 7 times. How many cities have you done this in? Because there are 7 cities across the country that you do this in. And this was Philadelphia, but there's Atlanta and San Diego and some others. And so people were talking about, there was some deference given to the veterans of the cities and the experiences and the numbers. Yeah. Well, here are the 3 threads that, and there may be more, but at the moment I'm thinking of 3 threads. That's really hard to say. You've had dental work this morning. I'm amazed that you can say 3 threads. I did. I had the right side of my mouth is still quite numb. So it's a good thing we don't have video today. I'm making very funny faces, but 3 threads is especially difficult. When I think about the first timer lanyards and some of the individual recognition for people and the stories, I think there's really 3 themes there. One is belonging. Mm-hmm. So, I think part of because what did weave me into that conference that I went to was not some sort of like name tag thing, but this one guy, we were walking to an event and he was like, "Hey, I'm Sean." And he was like, "Do you come to this a lot?" I was like, "No, it's my first time." And he goes, "Oh, here, I'll put you in my Facebook messenger." And he had this like group message thing going on in Facebook. And it was this little sort of back scenes like, "Hey, does anybody want to have lunch? You know, is anybody going to this? Cool. Where did everybody go?" And he goes, "Stay in there. We'll reactivate it next year." And that like took me and sort of, it literally, I think it was almost sort of like putting me on the raft in the river with them. Yeah. And I could drift off on my own. It's not like I was then lockstepped with someone, but having people, you know, if you think of onboarding, it's one thing to show someone to their desk and make sure they signed in or whatever, you know, there's that part of it. But then, and you do have to be a little bit careful. If it feels contrived, I think it loses all value whatsoever.
Right. But Sean wasn't part of that organization.
He wasn't.
So he was doing that. They have a community where that's part of their culture.
Right. So that was one bit of it. It can't feel contrived, but if you have a culture where, you know, I mean, in an office, you know who the new people are. So making sure they have someone to eat with, making sure all sorts of things to just kind of weave them in. Anything, I think one thing you have to always be aware of to have a really intensely good culture is belonging. I think another thing that sticks people is, and you can use some different words, but some sense of status recognition, some layer of the healthy kind of competition that calls people to a higher level of performance and like it brings the care out. Like I want to do a good job. You know, in Komen terms, that's raising money. I have a client who...
Well, it's not always raising money. It's also participating in their events, which
I've been in.
You have to raise money to do that, but you're not saying it's not a dollars game, because now you're like, I want to do this again. Oh, and by the way, I have to raise another $2,300, but I want to do this again to be a veteran.
They're not just recognizing the person who happened to raise $50,000 for that one walk.
No.
It's like so-and-so has done this 12 times now. And
correct.
So, because what they want is that longevity.
And it's attainable.
Well, but that's another good point in this. Status and recognition and competition for the things that you want to reinforce, which can be tricky because you can reinforce one thing and accidentally de-incentivize something else. So I have a client where they have these signs up, and I mean, these like televisions, it's almost like a closed captioning kind of thing. And it's constantly playing things about new products they're doing, highlighting people who have done particularly good things. They also even have some really unique ways of highlighting failure. I know that sounds really funny, but they want people to come forward with problems as quickly as possible so that they can solve them. They don't want, like, everybody messes up. And they know people are going to mess up, and they don't want people trying to fix it themselves so no one knows. So they'll be like, "Hey, Bob, accidentally deleted this stuff, but he let us know fast enough and we were able to solve it. And so everything was fine and the client never even knew it was a problem," versus, and so it sounds funny to highlight that stuff, but they want people to know it. You can't just say it's okay to fail and then never pat someone on the back for really screwing up. And
coming forward and fixing it and embracing that.
Yes. Because what they want to reinforce is honesty. So they have to publicly acknowledge that in some way. So that status and recognition and reward for things. And the last one is connection, which to me is a little bit different than belonging, that the stories that they weave in everywhere provides that personal connection. And I think that's the one that can feel like the biggest leap if you're not, an altruistic, if you're selling copiers, maybe that sense of connection to the story, it feels harder, but I don't really think it has to be. I think most businesses can find a way that they're making someone's life easier or simpler or
see, when you said connection,
something.
I didn't realize that that's where you're going. When I thought the distinction you were drawing is a sense of belonging to the organization and then a sense of connection to Susan and to Jim and to the people in it.
It's funny. When I wrote it down, that's actually what I meant. But then when I glanced back, I wrote the word stories beside it. And I was thinking more to that, like belonging to the bigger cause, but that's actually what I meant because I wrote it next to the one with the things on the back. So it's I know why Bob is here and why Karen is here, what they care about. So having that sense of, so for me, those are the three big themes that I think if someone doesn't think they can find ways to create belonging, a healthy kind of competition, status, recognition, whatever you want to call it, and connection, I think think it's worth a conversation. I would love to get into that conversation. Join the Facebook group. It could be your first question. Because I think those are the things that I hear that they thread in there that actually make it stick.
They did. And the thing was that you got to, although it would be great if you bought into all of that stuff, you might not be motivated by the desire to raise $10,000. Because a lot of people, and myself included, I don't like fundraising for charity. I mean, there are a million great and worthwhile organizations supporting 10 million incredibly valuable causes. Everybody knows somebody or themselves who are really passionate about some cause, and they know that somebody or some organization needs money. So I don't really like the fundraising part of it, but you feel connected when you're just having breakfast before going out on the walk, and somebody, normally in a normal conversation, somebody's like, "So what do you do?" "Well, I am an accountant and I do this." But
so you lie?
Here, yes, I become an accountant when I'm doing Komen walks. That's
I'm an accountant when I travel.
Evil story. So, but at Komen at the table, they're like, "So tell me about your mom."
Oh, that's so interesting.
And so the conversations,
you sidestep all of that, like all of that conversation.
Yeah, all of the Charlie Brown teacher stuff, and people immediately start talking. It's funny because you listen to the dynamic as the conversation. Tell me about your mom. And then there's this hugely emotional conversation back and forth, and there's a give and take. And then there's, by the way, my name is.
It's really upside down.
It's an upside down thing because you are there united in what you care deeply about. And even if you use the example of selling copiers, okay, but the you can connect to that mission, the office supplies, the businesses you support, make their stories your stories. But you also see all these organizations whose founders decide, yes, we do this, but we also want to do educational outreach, or we want to do this. And so they can connect to a mission that may not be selling copiers, but it may be that our mission is whatever it is.
Well, true, but that assumption is then still layering in some kind of altruistic or something. I think there's a, what's the word I want? Not a risk, but a something sort of skipped over. You're cheated out of something if only like worthy causes feel worthy. I think there's a lot of reason to get behind something. It could just be that it's fun. I mean, you could have a mission. There are companies for whom the mission is, make a lot of money. That's not bad. But you have to notice. Here's how I think of it. You talked about the pink bubble. The pink bubble works because it is well defined, and then everything is designed around that pink to reinforce that particular pink bubble. It's like the dog whistle that only dogs can hear because it's all pink bubble. So what is like every company can have a pink bubble. It doesn't have to be a bubble of like good.
No, it doesn't. And I'm just looking over, I was just thinking about our sponsors. So for example, Mind Over Machines, they can really connect with the mission of creating elegant solutions for business. It doesn't mean that they're curing cancer or, for all I know, maybe they are, but they could really pride themselves on there's a particularly thorny issue given them that's really a stumbling block for a business, and they can create elegant solutions for this. And that's cool to them. They happen to make money doing it, but they can celebrate the innovation. And there are a lot of companies that can do that, whether it's celebrating the innovation or celebrating the ability to meet a niche need or meet an impossible deadline. But just what it sounds trite, but what your superpower is as a company, and really celebrate that. When you happen to make money doing it.
Well, so you bring up a really important point. I think if a company, if an organization struggles to weave people into their pink bubble, whatever their bubble is, it may be that there's not a very well defined thing to get behind. I mean, that is very often the case. If there's not something to rally, it as you were talking, these don't quite meet the criteria for it. But one of the first things I wrote down was like cult logic. Like there are things to be learned from why cults work and how you bring people in.
Right.
One of the things that I sort of tied to that was, you mentioned the phones. They don't want you on their phones, controlling the environment a little bit to just to reinforce what you want and not reinforce what you don't want. There are part of the reason why cults are actually can be successful is because they are very, very, very well defined. Like it's very clear what the purpose is, what like everything is so defined and nothing else that's not that is allowed in the space. Right. So there's something to be taken from that. If you don't have something that's that clear, if it's kind of like, well, you could hang out for a while and whatever, and then, you know what, believe whatever you want, wear whatever you don't have to wear the purple shoes. It doesn't really matter.
Right.
That's how that sort of amorphous lack of, if there's not something to join, then you won't get people involved in that way.
Yeah. And I think, and I had mentioned this before, I think that in terms of culture, the pink bubble or whatever it is, the 5 most powerful words are, that's not who we are. I mean, right. So if you can define that's not who we are, it's kind of a relief. You can define who we are. And you may never find words for who we are, but you can continually narrow it down by that's not who we are. Right. Right. It's like, Justice Potter Stewart's definition of pornography. I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. Right.
Do you know that's actually the third time this, well, I'm not using that one, so I guess I can't count it, but 2 other times in the last week, actually possibly even like the last 4 days, I have used that quote, which is just kind of funny, I think.
Yes, but not recorded it.
That's true. That's true.
So there's that.
Okay. You mean like double points or something?
Perpetuity. Yes, whatever. I get double points when I do that. But it's the same thing with culture. That's not what we're about. That's not who we are. Mm-hmm. And if your people can't define that either in the clients you take on, the customers you take on, the projects you take on, it's a minefield when you say the people we hire, because I'm talking about more mindset and more things that care about them.
Well, people who want to throw themselves. So here's what I can assume. I presume there are people who come and do a walk and never come back and aren't particularly impressed. Like these things that you're mentioning don't stick. They don't, right. There's a dog whistle happening here and they're cats, and that's okay. So I think part of culture is it being okay that like dogs will hear the whistle and cats won't. Nothing against cats.
No, but what they want to do,
nothing against cats and nothing against copy salespeople.
But what they want to do is bring as many creatures into the pink bubble to increase the number of dogs that they might appeal to for the first time.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
So, for example, you have people, I know you have people who do this 60-mile walk because it's a challenge. They're like, well, look, I find it just to be a pain. It's hard for me to motivate myself to get in shape and go to the gym or whatever. So I need a goal, whether it's running this marathon or, oh, you know what? One of my friends is doing the 60-mile walk. I'll do the 60-mile walk.
It's why I first did that strong woman competition. Right. I just needed a structure. I didn't care what it was. Right. And I knew it couldn't be running. Like anything but running that'll give me something to train for. So I'm not just working out, but I'm focused on something.
Right. So those people in your analogy, they're cats. They might do it. They do some good for the organization. They fill out the numbers. They fundraise. But maybe they find out that they have dog characteristics, or maybe that's their one and done, and that's fine.
Yep. No, I think our metaphor sort of gets a little fuzzy there. But that's what I was thinking of the strong woman. I did it the first year just for that very like practical. I don't even know if that's the right word, but end goal reason. I just wanted something. It was utilitarian for me. Yeah. And then it became something different. The second year that I did it, it was a totally different reason I did it the second year than it was the first year. And I'm a little bummed I didn't do this last year, but maybe next year. But just the fact that I'm like bummed I didn't do it this year. I felt like something was left out. That means it planted a seed in me that I wasn't even looking to be planted. Now that sounds weird, but whatever.
No, but that's very true. People discover that kind of purpose that they didn't know they had. They discover a connection, which if just asked about it or if just reading about it, they wouldn't have known.
So here's a question. Because I've done a fair amount of work with firms with culture and whatnot. It's a conversation that comes up quite often. And I think it's a kind of a minefield because it can seem like something people want to fix or set it and forget it. And it's more just everything about how you do everything. But if someone wanted to move their organization towards something that feels the way this does, you're obviously not going to do all these things.
No.
What do you think, and I know I have a couple thoughts, but what do you think are some of the most important things that you experience there? Not those literal things, but what are the pieces that that you think are the most important ones to start with or to make sure that you have before you try and do other things?
I think the most important thing that you have to have is some evangelists in the crowd. In other words,
back to cults.
Well, no, I just think that, you could have people in management who are saying, this is our new initiative. This is who we are. This is what's on our recruiting brochures. This is what's on our marketing brochures. But I think what's really important is to have some frontline people who don't have management titles, who aren't seen as being in the boardroom, be the evangelists for whatever characteristics of the culture you believe are either there or you want to emphasize or you want to create. Because if it's just imposed from the top down, I won't give an absolute and say that it'll never work, but I will say that it's incredibly challenging.
Right, which probably means a little bit of starting where you are, like looking out there. You may not have that perfect person, but anyone who's kind of in that direction, I think what I hear you saying is like nurturing that, encouraging it, rewarding it. It doesn't have to be like a gift card reward, just like, acknowledging that is something you really value and that you want more of it. And
and making a part of it. There's something called the IKEA phenomenon, which is that
everything's apart and it takes forever to put together.
No. But there are studies that are done where if you take this particular piece of furniture and you bring people in and you ask them, how much would you pay for this? And it's perfectly put together. It's perfectly assembled. There are no mistakes, no scratches, no dents, no dings, nothing. It's perfectly put together. They'll give a price. But if you bring them into the room and you have a trainer there and they with the trainer will actually put it together, and then you ask them how much it is, almost uniformly they will give you a higher amount.
No.
Because, and it's known as the IKEA effect, because they had a role in building it, literally in this case. And so, yes, that's why I think evangelists are so important.
Oh my goodness. That first piece of IKEA furniture you buy, like you aren't, it's not that has already kicked in, but then once you have invested yourself in making it, then you probably then value their other things more.
Right. And you value the thing, even if the thing you put together isn't perfect,
right,
you value it more.
Well, there's a second layer art to that, because part of that is that they do a really good job of perfecting the put it together part. The desk that I have in my office, I also help put together, and I would burn that factory down if I could ever get a hold of whoever designed that. It was terrible. You know how with IKEA, they save you where like you can't really put the thing on wrong because they'll offset the holes or something so that you can't put it on backwards. Yeah, this is the opposite of that. So,
and it's a Harvard Business School study, by the way. I was just looking that up. It's when labor leads to love.
Oh, that's so interesting. So involving people that brings up a really good point where it's a little bit like the evangelist, but it's slightly different. When all the things that you struggle with as a leader of a company remain in the leadership bubble, and other people don't understand it, they don't have a line of sight to it, they don't know what goes into these conversations, they don't know what obstacles you're debating. And I'm not saying you have to tell them everything about everything, but in as much as they're protected from all that, they don't, it's harder to get involved. There's no labor. So there's no efforting. So they just hear random decisions fall from the sky and they don't understand. They don't have anything to, there's something about grappling that invests you in something. So finding ways for your people to grapple with the problems that you want your organization to solve, I think is a really beautiful way to I guess in your walk version, that was walking 60 miles.
Well, I think so. I mean, in going back, it's funny, I looked it up because I didn't know we were going to get to the IKEA effect, but the study was when labor leads to love.
Yeah.
And I did contemplate, I guess the last thing that I didn't mention in my story is that, yes, it wasn't just, hey, you raised $2,500, you sent out a bunch of emails and you did whatever. You walked 60 miles.
Yeah, which is in 3 days. That's
in
not
3 days.
It's not
And
a small amount.
that, in addition to the stories, in addition to everything else, you struggled with everybody. And you had blisters and sore feet and tired muscles and all that stuff. And that was their theory. And it's worked very well when labor leads to love. So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories.
Your stories.
You can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best
Lovingly
of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us.
Which
is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Eliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.